All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Kuhn. I go by Short Round online. I'm back again, and I'm a professional archaeologist in Washington. I'm joined by three more archaeologists on this panel, all friends of mine. Sarah Head, who you all know as our boss lady by now, and as host of the Archaeological Fantasies podcast. Rihanna Bennett, who goes by Anthropologist, and Heather Christie, who runs a fantastic YouTube channel called Archaeo Plays. And today we're going to be talking to you about something kind of important and the role we all play as archaeologists and anthropologists, and what anthropological expertise can offer game development, using a case study from something that happened earlier this year, which I'm guessing most of the audience already knows about. But for those of you who don't know, this is for you. Let's try to have a bit of fun here with it first, though. So I'm going to run through hopefully a quick little intro to catch everybody up, and then I'm going to bring in my lovely co-panelists with me to discuss this mess. So a couple months ago, on May 12, Activision Blizzard, the company known for World of Warcraft, StarCraft, and various other crafts, and Overwatch craft, published a new article on its website showcasing what it called the Diversity Space Tool, which was actually developed by King Digital, an independent entity that was acquired by Activision Blizzard in 2016. The article described the tool as a measurement device designed to prevent exclusion, unconscious bias, stereotyping, and tokenism in the character creation process at their studios. It also highlighted why diversity should be more focused on within the gaming industry, which is it's news to me. And in the months leading up to this announcement, the development teams at Activision Blizzard were encouraged to beta test the tool, and results had been reportedly immediate and enthusiastic. So this is good, right? Right. So let me show you a few of my favorite immediate and enthusiastic responses to this particular tool. Like this one. Activision Blizzard under fire for using strange diversity tool. Uh-oh. Activision Blizzard hopes it can solve diversity problems with math. Activision Blizzard's new diversity tool gets frosty reception from devs. More on this in a sec. And Activision Blizzard's diversity tool seemingly unaware that diversity is not a metric. And lastly, Activision Blizzard's diversity tool impressed exactly no one. So what happened? You'll notice that in all of these article snippets, screenshots and images from the game Overwatch were used. The reason for this being, King used Overwatch as a case study for good representation of diversity and inclusivity in an already established game franchise. Overwatch is known for its diversity, so much so that games like Apex have since followed the same formula as Overwatch. It's a game involving superheroes, with heroes representing many different nationalities from our own world, accompanied by a whole array of gender identities, sexual orientations, body types, ages, backgrounds, and even some disabilities too. So King identified 10 different categories for diverseness and identified a default type that characters would need to branch away from for higher marks on a radar graph. In doing so, you'd get things like being Egyptian gives you 7 points, deviating away from whatever the default is set to in culture. The gender of a woman giving you 5 points in gender identity, deviating away from the default that is set to being a male character in a video game, which is wild. Encouraging developers to deviate from the norm is good. Assigning numbers in a ranking system to human characteristics and traits is yucky and really messed up. And when you add cognitive ability to the list of categories, it gets even yuckier. We as anthropologists know just how yucky this kind of thing can get. And it's not just the internet that agrees. Here's a few words from the developers of Overwatch themselves. This is Dylan Snyder. He's a senior game developer for Overwatch 2, and he said, "Yes, we're definitely using a tool that we all found out existed for the first time yesterday. For sure, this is a real thing that's happening." In my time on Team 4, I've met nothing but genuine, wonderful people who not only want to make an amazing game, but are also incredibly open-minded and laser-focused on making good on the inclusive world that Overwatch promises. This has been such a punch to the gut for all of us. This is Melissa Kelly. She's a 3D character artist for Overwatch, and she said, God, I swear our own company tries so hard to slaughter any goodwill the actual devs who make the game have built. Overwatch doesn't even use this creepy dystopian chart. Our writers have eyes, the artists have eyes, the producers, directors, etc. As far as I know, all have eyes. You know what drives our diversity? The devs. We have people who work on the game from these cultures. That's it. That's literally it. If this creepy chart was made for the executive team to let us do our thing, that might track. So you go, Melissa. But speaking of creepy, I have one more thing that I'd like to share with you all. So this is a real video footage from the 17th Annual Game Developers Choice Awards in San Francisco, featuring a real human person applying the diversity space tool to Mario to show just how well this thing works. Let me see if I can play it.
So we discussed Super Mario Run, and we found that the game had some points in some areas, but completely lacked in others. So where the game lacked is in ability, since they're all non-disabled, and in sexual orientation as well, since they're all presumably straight. Where the game was a bit more diverse is in gender identity. 2 of the characters are female, which is, well, you know, a little bit outside of the norm. When it comes to culture...
Oh, can you guys not hear it? Oh, okay, sorry. Let me continue playing
Mario
it.
and Luigi are both Italian, which is still like Western, but it's not the most represented type, we presume. So we put them just a little bit on the, like, out there. And age as well. We, like, Mario, Peach, and Luigi are all sort of neither young nor old, but both Toad and Toadette are children, so that is, you know, just a bit outside of the norm we put them. And then we had body types as well. So what we noted here is that Mario is short, like he's actually shorter than Peach, so we gave him quite a high score for that. And also that the characters they're not necessarily very, very muscular, they're more like, you know, rounded. So yeah.
Yikes. So now, if I can get to the next slide, hold on. Whoop. Now I'm going to bring in my co-panelists to discuss this with me, how we think and how we feel about it as human beings being thrown through the process of a hierarchy rating system, but also as professionals with backgrounds in anthropology who are no strangers to this kind of thing historically in our profession. So as I work on bringing up our video, please unmute and let's discuss this.
First, I couldn't actually hear it because of the way my thing's set up in custom, but I think it's stupid that you would even apply a tool like that to Mario.
Yeah.
He's Italian. That's all you need to know.
Here we go. Yeah, this tool it was quite a shock to me when I first found out about this, because it was trending on Twitter that morning, I think, waking up to it, or was it late at night or something like that. And when I saw that, I told you guys before that I looked at the time, I looked at the date, I looked up numerous articles because I thought it was April Fool's. I thought there's no way they could have possibly, developed something like this and saw this as the way to help fix the gap of diversity in gaming and game development. And there's no way somebody would have signed off on this, right? And so I was thrown through a loop hearing this and put through this very these weird thoughts that I had to think, looking at the different categories of this tool, right? Cognitive ability, beauty, body type, socioeconomic background, ethnicity, nationality, all of these different types, and thinking, geez, what score would I get for all of my stuff? And at first I thought, I'm gonna try to think about it critically, what the developers of this tool would give my stuff. And in doing so, it started making me feel really sick. Even just really, really simple things, even things like being short, and thinking, what would being short give me as a score? Like, it's amazing that they thought this, and that they didn't think to consult somebody on this.
My only defense is that wasn't it just like one dude?
They never released
No, they
that.
hired MIT. The MIT actually created the original software for them, and then they continued developing it basically. But there were a lot of people involved in it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, MIT's full of really smart people, so I don't know why we're questioning this tool, you guys.
I would be willing to bet that MIT may not be responsible for the less helpful elements of this tool. I think the biggest issue, I mean, there's so many issues with this, but one of the biggest is the ranking system. There's no reason to rank diversity, and especially not through traits like physical ability or cognitive ability or race. Like, what are you ranking race for in a 1 out of 10? It doesn't. A lot of people who were kind of defending this tool said, well, but they're not saying that some people are more, have more cognitive ability than others. They're saying they deviate more from the norm in video games. And it's like, yes, but that doesn't make it better. That's still really bad. And as a disabled person myself, it's really bad to be ranking people based on their abilities, cognitive, physical, or otherwise. And that's just from a disability standpoint. There are so many other categories in this that are equally atrocious or worse. And the other thing, again, speaking from the disabled community, we don't rank each other on degrees of disability. That's not you're disabled, that's it. It doesn't, there's no requisite to be more disabled than somebody else or less disabled or whatever, mostly because so many disabilities are not visible, and the way that they affect people's lives aren't obvious a lot of the time. So trying to create some kind of hierarchy of somebody being more disabled than somebody else, it's not what the disabled community does at all. So there's a lot of, it's obvious that nobody who is disabled looked at this tool and felt that they at least had a voice to critique it. And I'm speaking about that because that's my own perspective, but I imagine the same is true for literally every other category on here as well.
Yeah, I think
Categories
there's something like the ranking system, but also setting heteronormative cis white male as the norm, like putting it as the centerfold to determining what is diverse that's a huge issue. Like putting, because you're essentially saying like, this is what is normal. Anything that goes below or above whatever ranking system they have is, you're othering people within the tool itself.
Exactly.
That's the whole point of not doing it. So the tool itself is an anti-diversity tool. And
it just, as a gamer myself, it especially makes, I in the intro I used the word yucky, and that's being picked up by chat now. This stuff is very yucky, but as a gamer it makes me feel especially yucky thinking now, I'm glad that the game developers cleared it up that this tool has never been applied to Overwatch, but thinking that if there was ever a game that I played that used this tool, this isn't how I want to be represented in a game. I think all of us for various reasons want to see ourselves in the games that we play, right? Like me as an Asian American woman, I would like to see more Asian main characters in video games. I'd like to see more women main characters in video games. I know we're making strides on that, but things like that. I want to see myself represented in a video game. I don't want to think that they came to the conclusion to put me in there because of the tool and because, in this, at the time that they used the tool, the character that they created that would just so happen to represent me just hit the right amount of numbers, was just the right amount, just perfect. Put them in there. I'd like to think that there's a lot more thought put into it than that. I would like to think that, they had creative teams look into it and that they talked to members of marginalized communities and really put thought into it, rather than let's just randomize a cool diversity character and go with that. And so yeah.
Though, would you, if the game devs didn't tell you that this tool was being used and produced the game, how would we even know?
That is...
Because, how would we even know they're using this checkbox of checkboxes?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean...
The question is, how would they use it? Is it going to be literally like a dice roll that they do, and they're just like, oh, well, it popped up that our new character is going to be a bisexual Iranian that's slightly aged. What? Is that how it's going to work? Is that what we're going to see?
So that's something...
honestly, that would be better than the tool they have.
Well, yeah,
because
honestly.
That's not what their tool does.
Yeah.
Because of
At
the
least
ranking
it's randomized at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So because of the ranking system, the numbers are not arbitrary in terms of what they're assigned to. So you need to assign, even if you are doing a randomizer, then at the very least, you're not saying that the number 1 is outranking a number 6 or something, or vice versa. You're like, no, these are all the same numbers. I'm literally rolling a die because I don't want my personal biases to be influencing this or something like that. Not that I recommend randomizers all the time, but
so they're still be meet a certain score of diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Sarah Head.
Thank you. I like my little bouncing hand. Crap. So the problem that I think a lot of people are having, I think the thing that triggered a lot of people in general, other than just the shittiness of the tool, was the radar graph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we've all talked about
I think
that.
whoever put the graphics together chose to use the radar graph because it looks cool and it gives this cool effect when you look at it. But the problem with the radar graph, for anybody who actually knows how to read graphs, which is the majority of us, the reason why it puts our heckles up is because it's assigning associative value.
Yeah.
So we're up here and we're like, you can't assign cognitive ability to ethnicity. You can't do that. And the reason why we say that, and then the developers are like, no, that's not what we're doing. It's like, well, yeah, but the graph that you're using, that's exactly what you're doing. Just using effing bar graph. I mean, your thing is still stupid, but at least with a bar graph, you wouldn't have been showing linkage,
Yeah.
You would have just been showing, well, not even value. You could just show what you're doing, this number of characters fall into this racial category, and this number of characters fall into this beauty standard, because isn't beauty one of the
It is,
categories?
yeah. Well, and so...
I mean, it's still an offensive tool, but at least you wouldn't have been saying that you view these things as being linked together. And that, I think, is what's really ticking people who understand how to read graphs off.
Yeah.
Which is also setting off the road to the internet.
Right.
It's a stupid tool, and I can't believe they put money into it, and I can't believe they don't understand why it's not a stupid tool, but...
Right. And going on what you were asking about earlier, Rihanna, how is the tool going to be applied? A lot of people did think it was a randomizer kind of thing. But from what I could understand and what I read about is that they want to use this tool to apply it to already not fully established characters, but characters being thrown through the character creation process to see how to improve upon them before they reach the finalization of that character. And so it is a tool to improve upon characters in that process. And I hate saying the improve upon thing, because that's right. And they put a radar graph in every image that came out about this tool. It wasn't just for the thumbnail of the article or whatever those are called, the header of the article or anything like that. There's a radar graph in everything. And my experience using radar graphs, and I keep bringing this up to everybody I talk to this about, is like, you know, it tells me that I need to work on my glutes more. It tells me that I need to socialize with this person in a video game more and get them all even, right? It tells me I need to improve upon something, and there's nothing to improve upon here. None of these 10 categories are things to improve upon. They're static human traits, and assigning number values to human traits, human characteristics, human behavior, we know with our anthropological training, is not something you do. And it's shocking to me that they received a wake-up call in the way that they did, but you know, it was telling to me that in thinking about it, like, for taking what I can speak on for ethnicity, right? Being Asian American or being Filipino, and thinking, all right, if I get like a 5 or something for that, you know, why so low or why so high? Is there any way I can improve upon it? Or why was that assigned to me? Why was this number assigned to me? And so that sort of thing for all of us and all of those different categories out there. Why was that number assigned to me, right? It was upsetting to think about.
The whole concept of, again, with the ethnicity, like, it is Asian, do they just have Asian? Is it just Asian flavor? Or do they say Asian and then try to break, you know, like they assign Asian to a character and then they try to break it down into all the different types of Asian that you can have. Like, you know, you first said I'm an Asian American, and you're like, I'm a Filipino. Like, there's more to that category.
Yeah, because they have
and that's true pretty much anywhere. So like, what are they doing? Did they just have, like, you know, the 5 basic groups and that's it? That's all you get? Or are they trying to break those groups down? And when you start doing that, like, is Asian 5 and Filipino is 5.6? I mean, this is just not a great tool. It makes no sense. But I guess if you're just using computers to just grind data, I guess that's how you have to do it. But that's not really diversity.
No.
Yeah. Which brings the purpose of this panel to, where it's just like, what could they have done to bring anthropology into it?
And that's why
there's a question in chat about that.
Yeah, and I'll read that out in just one second. But you know, like, that's why I included the tweets from the developers of Overwatch, and I thought it was really important to put that in there, especially what Melissa Kelly said, in that the diversity that drives their games, which are you know, infamous for diversity, being in Overwatch, right, Ree? Well, I think
yes, it is of most FPS games, including like Apex Legends and stuff. Like, it has been amazing to see how inclusive they attempt to be. There's a bunch of strides, and they have fumbled along the way. There's like the side story of Farah's background that I could go into, that, like, as an archaeologist and anthropologist, I take issue with how they handle that. But in terms of this example, then, like, yes, I'm an avid Overwatch player for years. Ana is one of my mains, so it was hurtful to see when this all came out, like, how they used her as the example, and it was just like, man, like, breaking her down into numbers, which, like, and I'm talking about a fictional character, how I felt insulted for Ana. Like, imagine doing this to, like, a real person or a real cultural group. Anywhere. It's just, like, just breaking them down into a number. And just the whole, that's mistakes that anthropology as a discipline has made in the past, where you try to put people into boxes, which is a whole mistake. Like, everything needs to be a spectrum.
Yeah.
Just everything as it is. So, yeah, so Overwatch has a special place in my heart. So it's been, I mean, like what the devs have said, like, their own parent company has been turning it into trash over the
Yeah.
everything they can to try and save it, and that includes like the love that they have for writing all of these characters, their backgrounds, their like it is was truly heartbreaking to see this happen to them again, you know, and they had nothing to do with it, but they're the since Overwatch was used as the example, Overwatch was the game that got tore down, which was pretty sad.
Right.
I think that's what, to get back to Anna's question, let's bring it back around to Anna's question. That was rude, I apologize. That's what we could bring. Like if they were to hire or just consult with an anthropologist, even us, just archaeologists, we can tell you that, no, I get that you want to be diverse because everybody does, but the way that you do that is you don't create an algorithm because it's an algorithm, and we all know how infamously great those are, Twitter. You go to people and you talk to people. Like if you want to put a character in your game that's, I don't know, from the Balkans, then you go to the Balkans and you talk to people from the Balkans about what kind of character they would like to see.
Yeah.
You go talk to them about what their superheroes are like, you know, who are the mythological characters, absorb a little bit of their culture, absorb a little bit about the people. You're never going to get it perfect. It's a flippin' game. You're not going to be perfect.
Everyone is unique.
Yeah.
Right, but at least attempt to be sensitive about the material and not just like create rando character and be like, hey, he's Balkan, hey! Because everybody's going to be like, no. And you're going to tick off most people that you're trying to reach.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's just common sense, honestly. You don't even need to go to school for this kind of crap.
Right.
I could go one more tangent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I've talked about this in a previous presentation before at the SHAs? No, it was SHAs in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
There's a discipline in the game development industry called user experience research. They test every iteration of their game development, mostly just in terms of like, do these buttons work for the users? Can they play the game without any issues? They test out bugs and stuff, but like they test the user experience in terms of the gameplay. So this is where I think that anthropology and archaeology can come in, is that if they could please start implementing user research, interacting with the users, because they use anthropological methods to do this. They do quantitative and qualitative surveys, they do in-depth interviews, they conduct ethnographies. So like there already is anthropology in game development. Why can't they start including it in narrative and character design and interacting not only with specialists in completing these research methods, but also interacting with the users themselves to ask them what kind of characters do you want to see, interacting with cultural groups of how well does this character represent your culture? Is there anything about it that is difficult for you to witness? Is there anything you want us to remove? Is there anything you want us to add? I feel like just implementing user research more focused on the actual development of the setting, the lore, the characters, just the narrative design as a whole could really impact how game development could be more inclusive and diverse without needing to assign whatever it was that this diversity tool was.
And I mean, again, that's where we come in.
Yeah.
Especially people who are trained in anthropology, like who went the anthropology route. Like that's what you do. You go out and you talk to the living groups, and you come to their house and you knock politely on the door and you ask them questions that they're willing to answer. Like you said, they're already doing some level of anthropology. Like, why not do this next step? If you actually care about diversity, which in my cynical heart of hearts, I don't believe they do. They care about perception and they want to be perceived as being diverse, which is why they have an algorithm and a checkbox system, because they don't actually care. Because if they did, these games developers have enough money that they could put forward to research in that kind of an area. And I mean, yeah, if it's a smaller game, like it's a one person house, like I'm willing to give you so much leeway because you're one person. What are you going to do? You don't have this kind of money. These games do. And so they really don't have an excuse for it.
Yeah.
It's also like the different departments have the deciding factor. So like maybe the dev team is trying to make this stride, but it's the marketing team, the business team that are doing their own internal tests and just being like, well, no, we don't want to include that. It's going to cost too much money, you know, so like, or they don't think it'll make a profit. You know, even though they're being more the devs wanted to be more inclusive, but then the marketing team does their research and like, well, we're not going to see a percentage increase in sales because you did this one thing, so you don't get to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's very important to understand that there's a lot of hierarchy in these places, in the same way that there's hierarchy in academia or in our own fields. That the Overwatch devs, for example, are saying we do care about this and we put it in ourselves. We didn't need this tool to be able to do it. And there are several tweets that made it seem like, you know, from devs saying this feels like something that, you know, upper management put together because it looked nice, and but really it has no bearing on the actual game itself. It feels like it's, you know, a different department effectively that isn't on the ground developing the game itself. And I think that is important. I mean, it doesn't make the tool any better, but it is important to keep in mind that the people who are actually developing the game oftentimes do want to include these things, but they don't necessarily have the power to be able to do that in a game dev situation, particularly in these larger studios. So, yeah.
Right, and you've got like executives viewing this kind of tool as like a fail-safe for their teams, the teams that they're managing. And somebody put in chat, technology is just the shortcut. That would be something somebody outside of the dev team would think that would cover their asses, when actually this is not the way to do it.
Well, that's why reactions like this are important, though. I mean, they got a lot of backlash publicly for this tool.
Yeah.
It's not just us, this panel. They got a lot of bad press. I mean, you have the usual suspects, but you also had a lot of like the big game writers, the big game websites were writing about this. Some of the larger YouTube channels that are, and I only bring up YouTube because it's what I use, but a lot of the big game YouTube channels were not kind. Like, they were mocking and very sarcastic about this tool. Like, this is not the kind of press you want.
No.
And I would think, as a game developer, not the game devs, but a company that has a game that is supposed to be diverse, if you're seeing this kind of public backlash, maybe you would take a step back and be like, all right, maybe not. But my other thing is they've already put the money into this tool. They're not going to not use it.
Yeah, I believe in their apology, or rather not apology, but edit to the article that initially released this. They did a little editor's note thing at the top saying that the tool was meant to be an optional device, an optional tool that their game development teams could choose to use if they wanted, even though that was not what the article mentioned originally. Yeah, the article mentioned that they were going to implement this tool on all of their studios effective immediately, pretty much. But then they went back to say, no, it's optional. But again, me as a gamer would not feel comfortable playing a game that utilized this tool, even optionally. This shouldn't be an option. There should be the devs are hired for a reason. The devs are hired to create these characters, and to go through that process of research and being creative with it and having some heart with it. And this tool is not something that I don't think people should have access to.
Yeah, I think they need to get rid of the tool as quickly as possible, really. Especially because characters, even if you do create characters using this tool, they're not, that's not going to get you the best result in terms of creating a character. So even from a narrative perspective or an immersion perspective, it's far better to create the characters yourself and just make sure that they don't fall into the tropes of every other video game out there. You know, again, as one of the devs said, we have eyes. You know, so our diversity came from us looking at people and, you know, creating people that we saw in the world and just putting those in the games and making sure it wasn't, you know, the sort of stereotypical video game hero character all the time. That's not that hard to do.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And yeah, it feels like it's an overcomplication of of an issue. And looking at the press around it, it's like looking at what the company was saying their intentions were with it and where they were coming from, you know, what sparked the idea, all of that stuff is actually in a good place.
Yes,
it's
yeah.
like they're not off the mark in those areas. It's the execution where
Right.
it crashes and burns. And it does feel like potentially people who don't necessarily belong to marginalized communities, or don't, you know, if they do, it doesn't necessarily affect them as much, or something, they're not concerned about it or something, maybe. It feels like somebody who's not familiar with being a part of a marginalized community trying to create better inclusion for marginalized communities, not knowing how to do it,
Mhm.
and then saying, well, science and objectivity is going to help us.
Yeah.
And
What they
that's,
did.
yeah.
What they did is they created a special chair that only one chair, that one person is going to be selected from all marginalized groups, and that one person is going to take that chair and now be the voice of all marginalized groups. And I'm subtweeting here, but it is kind of what they did, though. And instead of actually talking to anybody from a marginalized group, they're just like, "What? Let's make a robot do it."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just super annoying. Now, because we have 15 minutes and because I'm an asshole, what about the people who like this tool and the people who don't see an issue with it? And how do we reach them? How do we explain to them politely, or not so politely? I always use politeness, but how do we explain to them that this tool isn't great? Because a lot of people really do see this as just a randomizer, just a random character generator. And if I didn't know what I know about the tool, I might perceive it as such as well. I don't know if I would ever use it, but definitely knowing what I know about it, and even as a writer, I wouldn't use it as a character generator.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of people out there who don't see an issue with this. So how do we reach them? Because those are the people we really should be going for.
I think if people know what radar graphs are,
Mhm.
and they don't have an issue with this, then there's a high chance we're not going to reach them. Simply
a lot
because
of people don't know what radar graphs are. They just
exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm saying if it's people who know what radar graphs are and know what this tool is doing, then we're unlikely to change their mind, because they understand that this is ranking these different
Right.
groups with numbers 1 to 10, which is an incredibly small number given the number of possibilities in each of those categories anyway.
Yeah.
Even if it were arbitrary. So there's a subset of people that we're not going to change their minds, almost certainly. In terms of people who don't necessarily know what a radar graph is, so far having explained this to a number of people, I've found that explaining what a radar graph is and what that means for this tool, that generally resolves any goodwill they had for the tool itself. And a lot of
helps.
people say, "Oh no, I hadn't realized that. That is kind of awful," and that makes a lot of sense. In terms of people saying, "Well, then why not just use a randomizer?" My argument would be, how can you be sure that your randomizer is accounting for every single possibility in each of those categories? And if not, how do you determine which representations of those categories you use in your randomizer? Because that by itself is a bias. If you only have 10 numbers or 20 numbers, say you roll a d20 to get somebody's ethnicity, there are tens of thousands so many ethnicities in the world. So how in the world can you put all of them into a randomizer? And you could sit there and say, well, but some of these groups are smaller than others, but why would that matter? You know, if your goal is to be truly random, how do you create a system that is random? And if it's going to take that much work, just use your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Sarah, did you have a hand up? I've also got a.
You go, because this will derail from what we're talking about at this point.
Okay. I've had a couple people now try to when hearing about this news initially, tell me You know, it's just a randomizer. It's similar to how you make D&D characters if you're out of inspiration. If you're out of inspiration, you can use just a randomizer to try to figure out something fun you can play. And that's something I've done with people in the Archeo Gaming Collective a couple times already now. It's just an interesting game to think, like, what's a character I can get that I didn't think of making before? At the end, we didn't put, you know, these numbers that we assign to these fictional classes, these fictional races, or anything like that through a graph of any kind. The graph is the problem here. And I didn't like look back at a graph and see all the bars or all the stretches of a radar graph, and what kind of character that gave me at the end of the day. And so the graph is the big thing, and the graph proves that this is not a randomizer and that the numbers are intentional. The numbers they didn't intend it to be a hierarchy, but in assigning numbers of how far away from the norm you want to stretch, you're introducing a goal and how much a certain character and a certain trait comes away from that goal. How successful a trait is deviating away from the standard. And in that way, there are some characters that are more successful with the traits that they have, that they were born with, than others. And that's the problem there. That's the hierarchy that they introduced, and they can't deny that. They can't deny that they created a rating system and a hierarchy on human traits and characteristics. What were you gonna? I want to bring you in, Sarah, even if it is a tangent to whatever you wanted to say, though.
There was a question that came across chat, and it's gonna sound like it's gonna heat me up, and it's nothing personal. So please, the person who asked this, don't take this as a personal thing. There is this idea that culture and physical traits are culture is not your physical traits. Culture is where you grew up. Culture is how you were raised. Culture is very social. So this, in the question, this idea that, you know, your eyes could be wider than is normal for the culture, that's not a thing. That doesn't happen. So I understand that there's this idea that an algorithm, that a robot, that a non-human thinking brain can take away the subconscious bias that a human will have. But that's part of the human experience. And if you are aware that you might have a subconscious bias, which you should be because you are human and you will have those, there is no one on this planet that does not have biases, and just acknowledge that you are aware of it, then you know to reach out to groups from certain ethnicities, from certain cultures, if those are the groups you're targeting. There is no way to avoid subconscious or unconscious biases.
Yeah.
It's not possible. And using a computer or an algorithm to try to do that is only going to create unrealistic, because a computer only makes connections. Computers don't think. And so you're either going to get a randomized pile of garbage that doesn't exist, period, or you're going to get connections that are not acceptable. Like, you know, you're going to get, to go back to this radar graph and the assigning of numbers to the norm. You know, the word deviation is the big key here. We are deviating from the norm in order to assign value to different races, different cultures, different ethnicities, different cognitive abilities. Like, how do you even rank that? Different beauty? What does that even mean? Physical ability? Okay, but break that down. There's so many different ways that you can be physically different from what? You know, it's the categories alone are insulting, and then you're assigning value to them, and then to fall back under the idea that, oh, a robot's it has no bias. The robot totally, the algorithm totally has a bias. The robot and the algorithm have the bias of the programmer. They don't get created in a vacuum. They get created by the human brain. And so there is nothing that doesn't have a bias. The best way to get around a bias, subconscious or conscious or otherwise, is to go to the group of people that you want to represent.
Yep.
If I want to represent an inner city Black youth, I'm going to go to a high school that's in the inner city and talk to Black youth. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to do, because those are the people I'm trying to reach.
Yeah.
It's not I want an Asian character whose eyes are too white. It's just not the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if that got me heated, but...
No, it's important to mention. And, there's no one who knows how to create a better, let's say, an Asian American character than an Asian American person. There's no one who knows how to create a character with a certain disability as a person with that disability. There's no one who's, that's... So somebody mentioned in the comments earlier that a diverse team makes a diverse game, and I agree. And it's things that I in the boards that I sit on and the diversity committees and other committees that I sit on, people are starting to come to that conclusion. But in the game development perspective, and one that has a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different traits and stuff like that, if you've talked to somebody and made a character to represent the different traits of everyone on your team, then expand. Then it's time to go outwards. That is our advice there, because you have to discuss it with them, right? Thought I heard somebody just now. But for every type of character that you're making, bring a person in from that lived experience to help you make that character. At the end of the day, that's what's most important. And if you don't know how to access those communities, if you don't know how to start that process or what to do or how to navigate it in the best way, that's stuff that we as anthropologists are trained to do. But at the end of the day, you also can't just hire an anthropologist by ourselves and think that you've tackled this either. Our job is to expand your network. Our job would be to bring in marginalized communities and draw attention to the fact that you need to do more research and reach out to more people, and you're not reaching out to enough people. We study human behavior, human culture, human traditions across time, and if you don't have enough of that involvement in the process, that's, at the end of the day, that's all an anthropologist could tell you. Right, so...
I want to throw in that this isn't just a Western problem. Like, I know everybody... I know we are speaking from a Western perspective, because as far as I know, we're all from this chunk of the world. But this does happen in pretty much any game developing company that develops in a vacuum. So, I mean, this is a problem with all game developers, not just our game developers. We're just hammering on our game developers because they're the ones we know. So.
Right.
Yeah. And I do also want to just, connecting to what Sarah was saying about computers and what they can do and how they're inherently biased because the people are teaching the computers what to look for. That's absolutely true here. It's also absolutely true in archaeological and anthropological research. And there's been a growing trend over the last 5 to 10 years with interest in machine learning. And you've probably seen that even if you're not in archaeology or anthropology, you've probably seen it in the media quite a bit. And it's seen as this objective thing because the computer is making the calculations, and so it can't be biased. But that's categorically incorrect, because the only way that the machine learns what to look for is because a person told it what to look for in the first place.
Yeah.
So there just echoing, mostly because it's a good point, but also because it's not just in video games that this kind of thinking happens. It is also in pretty much any field that you go into. So if there's anybody sitting there saying, wow, that sounds really rough for game development, glad I'm not in that industry, this trend is probably also in your industry. I really hate to burst your bubble, but
yeah.
yeah, just to keep in mind.
Yeah, and so on that note, since we're in the last minute here, I'm going to bring it back to the slide because, or the slides, because as I was preparing this, Heather, you tuned me in on a really, really great quote that just really echoed everything we're saying here. So if I can figure out a way to bring this up again, hold on, I can do this.
You believe
Thank you. I've got one last slide that we wanna touch on, and it is this one. And Heather, if you'd like to take over.
Sure. Yeah. This is something that I'm a big fan of the show Numbers. There are issues with it, but it also does some really nice things at times. And this is from the pilot of the show. And this is, if you don't know the show Numbers, it's a crime show, basically, where there are two brothers, one of whom works for the FBI and the other of whom is a math genius. And basically in the pilot, the math genius finds his FBI brother's cases and starts trying to map where the next crime of the episode is going to happen, and so he is successful to some degree, but he actually fails in the end. And he doesn't only fail once; he fails like 2 or 3 times, really badly, and he doesn't know what's gone wrong. And so he goes to his friend Larry, who is a theoretical physicist, and says, you know, something went wrong. I don't know what, and now it's like I can't even think. And Larry, they're in an arcade when they have this conversation, which makes it even better. Larry just goes, well, let me guess. You tried to solve a problem involving human behavior, and it blew up in your face. And Charlie's like, yeah, pretty much. I don't effectively, like, I don't understand why it did that. And Larry, you can read the quote as well. I'll read it through just in case people are visually impaired. But he says, okay, well, Charles, you are a mathematician. You're always looking for the elegant solution. Human behavior is rarely, if ever, elegant. The universe is full of these odd bumps and twists. You know, perhaps you need to make your equation less elegant and more complicated, less precise, more descriptive. It's not going to be as pretty, but it might work a little bit better. And the reason that this quote is important is A, it encapsulates a lot of the human factor in things anyway, but also this particular quote underpins everything in the rest of the show, because if Charlie doesn't learn to factor in humanity, none of his equations will ever work and he won't help anybody. So in looking at this tool, I was very much reminded of this scene also because I like Numbers and it's a good show, but it struck a chord of, you know, people trying to assign objective mathematical principles to something that is very human in nature, and then it blows up in their face and they don't understand why, and it just, that's the quote. Yeah,
and it's something that we all have to think about, and you know, applying mathematical, you know, equations and stuff to human behavior. It's just, so we end on this, and I just want to thank all of you guys for speaking with me on this topic. It's so important, and I'm glad we got to cover it at this con, and for the great discussion that was happening in chat, and all of the thought that has been put on into this topic. I really want to thank everybody, and I'm glad that we were able to do this. So thank you guys so much, and we're 2 minutes over time, and so we'll give this to the next presenters. But thank you guys all very, very much, and look forward to the next presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for organizing.
Thank you. Bye.